When I joined, we were worth about $17 million. And then when I left, the company value had peaked at $9 billion.
What technique, what marketing, and just break down your approach of how you would do that for someone in this space. I feel like there's a lot of noise out there. Everyone has a new AI tool to help you with this nowadays. But let's just demystify some of that and break it down and make it super simple. How do you think about going from this to targeting your ICP directly or building a brand in your industry?
Meta and how much attention is being spent to like Mark Zuckerberg's hair. He's just like this new vibed out CEO, right? I would argue more impactful to the Meta brand than Meta's next multi-million-dollar ad campaign.
Why don't you also briefly cover the challenge you're trying to solve with marketing?
That you grew your Instagram or TikTok account from 100 to 100,000 in 6 months. Depending on your business, that could be enough to close a seed deal, right? Or to get in your first angel check.
Hey guys, welcome back to Funds and Founders. We have Cody back for part 2. Why don't you just briefly tell people your background, Cody, for people who don't know?
Yeah, thanks for having me, Abby. Minnesota native, did about a decade in Silicon Valley. That's where I got my first crack at, let's call it tech or startups. Was fortunate enough to find myself on the kind of ground floor of eShares, which eventually became Carta. So I did about an 8-year stint there, helped that company scale from about 30 some employees when I joined. We were worth about $17 million. Just closed the Series A. And then when I left, there was about 2,000 employees and the company value had peaked at about just under $9 billion. So I was just super lucky to find myself in the right place at the right time and got to ride a roller coaster, which gave me, I would say a career's worth of experience as it relates to hyper growth startups. Spent most of that time front of house doing sales, go-to-market to business development across new markets, across U.S. and non-U.S. markets. Did a stint in Singapore, Southeast Asia. I led the team there. I was out there for about 2.5 years, just scaling our APAC presence. Was the first U.S. employee, and have since left and taken all of those learnings and understandings and targeting them, channeling them towards real estate and homeownership, trying to make it easier for people to coordinate resources and find alternative paths to, let's call it, non-traditional homeownership.
Nice. And the company name?
Company is called Tomi Homes.
T-O-M-I.
T-O-M-I, Tomi, not to be confused with Tommy. Yeah, Tomi.
And you're also advising a couple startups and companies on GTM and outbound stuff, right?
Yeah, we've got 2 active engagements right now as I'm building Tomi, and those are focused on helping build personal brands, helping automate a lot of the go-to-market, or like let's call it the top of funnel marketing engine. Yeah. So the days are busy, man.
What I wanted to do today was sort of break down a hypothetical founder who's early, has some traction, and is trying to figure out their GTM, right? So what would you say is best to sort of think about this persona and break down? And we could go through strategies you recommend, what to try, what not to try. Maybe we break it up into B2B, B2C, but we'll defer to how you think about GTM, how you think about the space, and what should someone do to help go this funnel. And sort of some of the questions I'm trying to answer is, I feel like there's a lot of noise out there. There's a lot of like, do this to get leads, do this to whatever, this tool, that tools. Everyone has a new AI tool to help you with this nowadays. But let's just demystify some of that and break it down and make it super simple of like, hey, start with this, validate, invalidate, and then move on, and we'll talk through that scenario.
For sure. Yeah, happy to touch on it. I think I bring a relatively unique experience here too, because when I was at Carta, we had a lot of success in the business development space, and I got to be a part of that as the team was scaling. And so I saw it through the lens of this B2B, where there was arguably like fantastic product market fit. So it all felt really easy. Come to find, it's not as easy as you would think, especially when you are, trying to do it or build it for yourself and you haven't, kind of hit that level, market awareness or acceptance or, fit.
And also maybe while we're talking through the scenario, if we can talk about the difference of having a VC backed sort of bank account versus, being more relatively bootstrapped or early or just more cash conscious, and how maybe that changes an approach, but still allows you to be.
Yeah. So I think, you talk to anyone about like any area of like their personal expertise, and I feel like you ask them a question and the de facto reply is some sort of, it depends, right?
Yeah.
Which I'm going to give you here as well, right?
Sure. Yeah.
But ultimately, I just think that like the lean startup philosophy is still holds true today. I think it's like a classic principle based writing, which was what was his name, Reese.
Yeah, yeah.
And I do think ultimately, at the early days when you're still trying to figure out what's working, what you have, what the market resonates with the market, it's all about your ability to test and iterate. And I can say that confidently, knowing that in the last 12 months in the work that I've been doing with Tomi, it's like it hasn't been nearly as quick, right? There's so many more things that I wish I would have done. I wish I would have spent less time on the first website. I'm completely overhauling it again for the third time, making decisions that allow you to just put things out into the world, figuring out ways to communicate your value and educate and entertain your audience, find where they are and then speak to them and drive them to these things and see how they engage, right? I have not been doing a great job at that for Tomi personally, but I do have experience, of what that looks like when it's being done well at a place like Carta or some of these other companies that I'm working with today that have a little bit more traction. Part of that, there is a correlation between the money that you can invest to test these things and the speed that you can move. So if you're bootstrapping, right, or if you're trying to do everything organically, which I've spent a lot of time on the marketing front with Tomi, is how can I generate an audience? How can I get more followers across social media? It just takes more time unless you get lucky, strike gold, and like hit something that clearly resonates, right, or go viral because you do the ice bucket challenge or something. Redirect that question. Where do we want to go with that?
Let's break down a B2B SaaS founder trying to gain traction and do marketing. Like there's traction, but sort of moving to the next step of like, how do I get more customers and go about that? Let's break down what are the options for this hypothetical scenario where what channels, what techniques, what marketing, and just break down your approach of how you would do that for someone in this space. And then we can move to B2C.
Again, keeping with the theme of just constantly being able to collect useful directional information about your business, you do want to create, and I'm starting to move away from this whole funnel framework, right? The traditional kind of funnel that we hear about people at the top, and then you want to work them through, because I believe there are now so many. Used to be, if you're selling a B2B product, even B2C in a lot of ways, you need to generate some sort of awareness, and that's either through great marketing efforts or some form of outbound communication. Prospect, that lead, that target, is going to Google search you and come through. It was a relatively narrow or well-defined process for how someone finds you or gets into your funnel. I think a lot of that is like shifting. I think we're expanding beyond this funnel concept, where now it's about creating mind share and an inertia around your business. And so, one of the ways that I'm doing this, again, on the B2C side, which is not answering your question directly, but I do think there are ways that you can put value out there, whether it's a tool, an ROI calculator, some sort of thing. Use that as just a touch point to capture some information or potentially breadcrumb them in a little bit further so you can collect a little bit more information, so you can use that information to more meaningfully engage with them in the future. It's really just about kind of enriching and building bigger, more robust, more meaningful profiles about these individuals, so you can understand ways that you can convey more valuable message directly to them, right? Like this whole marketing game is like a one-to-one. It's not a one-to-many anymore. People want to be told a story that resonates directly with them, because if you're not, there's just so much other information out there that 100%. They can go spend their time with.
So how do you think about channels in this space, right? Following on what you're saying, how do you think about targeting this person one-on-one, tailoring the message, understanding how to sort of market to this person, and what channels are you using for the same? And let's break it down. Let's do B2B and B2C and like what you recommend for either.
So for B2B, what we did at Carta, right? And this is not like there's no revolutionary insight here, right? It was all a lot of the key blocking and tackling that is required. I think what's exciting about this moment in time is where more and more tools are becoming available to create a tremendous amount of leverage for a single individual, right? I'm spending a lot of time with N8N, which is workflow automation. That's the Zapier Make.com competitor. But on the B2B front, I mean, it is outbound emailing, and you have to be aware of your business and your business economics and what it's going to take to kind of reach the next phase of the maturity or the life cycle of the business. And so if you're selling $10 product, right, and you decide that you want this to be a VC backable business, right? Like you have to start to run the napkin math of like, okay, how many of these customers do I need to sell this $10 product to, and what is that going to do as far as our future roadmap? Can we extract more value? What's the lifetime value? All of those types of things. You can't answer it in a one like silver bullet, right? With this question, it's like, what's your product? How long does it take someone to typically sign up? Is it just that person involved, or is it a more complicated sales cycle involving multiple stakeholders across different levels of an org? LinkedIn is obviously really good for B2B, right? That's no news to anyone.
Yeah.
And I think a big piece it's more universally applicable and relevant right now is that anyone, it doesn't matter if you're a frontline salesperson or you're the founder of your own startup, you can build your own personal brand that can have a massive impact on your ability to execute towards your goals or objectives, right? And so that's kind of the biggest piece that I would say is, right now I'm spending so much time thinking about and not enough time executing, but coming up and figuring out how I want to show up in the world related to all the things that I'm trying to tackle and do, right? So
how do you think about personal brand versus company brand, right? So where should one focus, converts and resonates more with potential customers? What's your take and advice around that?
I, at this point, am leaning heavily towards personal brand. You're seeing this at the highest levels of the largest organizations, right? Like Meta, how much news of the news cycle and how much attention is being spent to like Mark Zuckerberg's hair and his like new threads, right? And how he's just like this new vibed out CEO, right? Like that whole makeover is, I would argue, more impactful to the Meta brand than Meta's next multi-million-dollar ad campaign. And I don't think that there's any reason to believe that doesn't hold true at every level of the organization. And if you're thinking about it for yourself, it makes more sense to invest in yourself as opposed to trying to build. And that's not to say that obviously right? Like they do go hand in hand to an extent. If you're buying or trying to sell a product or service, right, that you're representing, you're working for, the people do need to trust that product can deliver the value that they're looking for. And so you can't completely neglect it, but I would say it's almost like a 90-10 split. Like every person should be spending a majority of the time on what they can do to provide value to their ecosystem and their market, their stakeholders, because that's going to go a lot further than them sending out the next white paper or infographic that the marketing team put out.
And how do you think about going from this to targeting your ICP directly or building a brand in your industry, right? So like, do you have opinions on, like, I've talked to a couple of people recently where they're like, hey, if you know who your ICP is, your LinkedIn should just be targeting them to get them on calls. Versus, is your brand more like, hey, I am X about industry Y, like that's what I do. And then within that, if there's conversions, like, do you understand the question I'm trying to ask?
So it's right. Like it's like how much time and energy should you devote to speaking directly to the ICP that I would argue is like that you believe the demographic, the cohort that you believe is your ICP, right? Especially because I would imagine that a lot of the people listening to this are probably at that stage where it's a lot of hypothesis, right? There's not a tremendous amount of data to support one assumption or the other. It's a good question that depends a little bit on the business. Like, what are you? Are you an agency? Are you a content creator where simple awareness and engagement, if you can show that you grew your Instagram or TikTok account from 100 to 100,000 in 6 months, depending on your business, that could be enough to close a seed deal, right? Or to get in your first angel check, right? So there is an argument to make. Is like, ultimately all you really need to do is say, like, what's the most valuable outcome I'm optimizing for? Do I need this person to give me $10,000 to provide this service? Do I need these 100 people to engage with this product so I can build an email list? What's your goal? And then, what are your efforts and how are you helping get people to that outcome? It could be either, to be honest with you.
And similarly in the B2C space, I feel like there's not even B2C, just in general. I think there's this thing going on in the Valley where everyone's like in founder story vlog mode, where lately on YouTube, everything's been popping up like, oh, look at me building my company. Hey, we pivoted.
BTS,
hey, we went from like 10 to 20 million, right? And I'm curious as to how much does that end up affecting the actual growth of the company, right? Because if there's so much more importance on building a personal brand, how much mental energy and time is now being spent on building a personal brand versus trying to actually build a company? And maybe there's a bit of both. I don't know. But like I've heard, like, to this point of like everyone's like, hey, build a brand, you should be founder-led sales. Like I agree with all of that. Does it now reduce the probability of a successful company because it's now split efforts and devotion, or no? Or
Yeah.
no?
Yeah.
Just
What's
random.
the opportunity cost, right? Of like
Yeah.
really focusing, making your personal brand like the number one. Well, here's the question, Abby, right? Is like, are you a solo founder trying to build a lifestyle business or something that you love? And if the company doesn't work, but if you have 500,000 followers who you've attracted because you're doing home ownership content that people find entertaining and educational, what's that going to mean for the next opportunity that you take on, right? So I think it matters more at the highest level. I think the personal brand almost becomes ubiquitous with the company if you're talking at
Yeah.
the CEO or the founder. Lower levels, I think you probably need to be a little bit more cognizant of that split, right? Because the outside perception is the perception is the reality, right? So if your boss thinks that you're doing like we've all seen those super cringe videos of the PMs at Meta or Google of like a day in the life, right? And they're like, I
Yeah.
go get a
Yeah.
snack and then I fucking suntan on the roof, right? It'd be like, how excited is the manager after watching that to be like, let me fire her. Like, I want to be the
Yeah.
person to fire that person. So it needs to be, if you are more rank and file and you do believe that your personal brand is going to help you close deals, you need to be able to either demonstrate the value or at least speak to, you need to be able to rationalize the decision making. If you're spending all of your time, if you're not making your cold calls or if you're not hitting your number and you're spending, a majority of your time on social media, it's like, you just got to be cognizant of your
Yeah.
surroundings and ultimately, how it's being perceived.
Shifting gears a little bit to B2C, what are some channels you recommend for someone building a B2C startup? Is still LinkedIn, Instagram? I've been hearing a lot about TikTok lately with
Yeah.
people doing TikTok ads, not ads, but like just UGC content to get app downloads and
Yeah.
stuff, which I would consider like a B2C space. But like just off the top of your head and some with like some of your background with Carta, how do you think about this and what channels does a B2C founder have to explore?
Yeah, well, Carta being the B2B business, might not be the best example for that, right? I mean, marketing at Carta, the early days was like a four-letter word. Like you couldn't talk about it. It was that like that
Yeah.
product-led contrarian mindset. This was back early 2010s where the CEO was like, if we have a valuable product and we have the right channel partners, because there was so much, the network effect allows you to like apply a different like formula to how you think about growing if you have network
Yeah.
effects, right? It kind of really does change the calculus in a lot of ways, and Carta had that. So it was, how do we build things or create value or leverage with lawyers and VCs, because those are the people who are ultimately going to decide what company, when a company uses Carta, or if a company uses Carta, right? So that's the B2B side. B2C is funny because I have not really had any success. I've put a good amount of time and energy into this as far as marketing Tomi and shared homeownership, and I haven't really had the success that I've been hoping for. Right? I've got, go follow me, get Tomi, get underscore TOMI. But my 200 followers are not like, am I the best person to answer this question in terms of like, you need to be, tripling down on Instagram? For me, it's really, again, about what I've started to focus on, what I've reoriented my energy around. What are the things that feel like they're enough of a core competency for me, aligned with my day to day, so I can build a habit around them. So recently, because like it's not natural for me to get in front of a camera and do like a reel, like, hey, you
Yeah.
want to know
Yeah.
why home ownership isn't for you, right? Like, it's just, I can do it, I've done it. It's hard for me though. It's not natural. Me getting up every day and doing that is harder than me getting up and, I've generated these AI posts with some help. We're now basically, we're tying it to a product that we offer, a tool that helps people understand and start to financially model what home co-ownership could mean for them and their like monthly cost to own, but then tying that to active listings and like going and grabbing a listing in LA or San Francisco, showing them. And then we've got this framework that's highly repeatable, right? So now we have one, piece of content, one type of content that I can post every day, right? And it's relatively automated. It's valuable because it's pointing to the brand. It shows our tools and like the UI in action, right? And that's something that's like one stick in the fire. It's not going
Makes
to,
sense.
keep you warm through the night, but it's like it's going to help, be an additive piece. And then, for me personally, again, because I don't feel that's my strength, is to just go live and walk around and document my entire life. It's like podcasts are another strategy for me, right? That's why we're, getting back together. It's like, I would love to do more podcasts because I think that the free form, longer form, open
Yeah.
dialogue is something that is easier for me to do than some of the alternatives. So I think it's really just about you go listen to all the top people. It's about consistency. It's like these platforms
100%.
reward consistency. If you can just keep on doing it, you're going to inevitably get incrementally better. And so many people, that's where it burns out, right? So just find what works for you, and then bake that into your routine, bake that into your weekly schedule, time box it, and just keep doing it.
And there's also this new trend on social where people are heavily moving towards, like, just social is moving towards less subscribers and followers and more just content, right? So like you could have
Discovery.
a channel with like 10 subscribers, but you could get video with a couple million views.
That's right.
Because discovery is so much more easier. It doesn't matter as much about followers, right?
Yeah.
I feel like that vanity metric is still some validation and some like ad space oriented metrics of like, I got 1 million subscribers, I'm gonna do this, right? It obviously helps supercharge your content, but yes, if your content's good, it can get discovered without you having a follower base.
I think a lot of the credit to this shift goes to TikTok, because that's what TikTok did that differentiated itself from Instagram, is it became a discovery engine as
100%.
opposed to Instagram, which, you know, had the innate kind of core concept of like the social graph, right, from Facebook. I completely agree, and maybe that makes me feel a little bit better about my 200 followers that I have on Shomi, because, you know, in the last 30 days we've had, you know, over 4,000, you know, content engagements, right? It's been seen, or, you know, so I think that is right. I don't know how it becomes harder when you don't have the followers to track. It becomes a little bit more obfuscated in terms of tracking like the direct impact, right? Because if it's just someone seeing it, how do you quantify the value of an engagement? I think
Of an impression,
yeah. I was just listening to a different podcast, and one of the guys, it was like a 7-Eleven and 4. Have you heard the 7-Eleven 4
No,
framework?
I have
Where
not. No.
you got to like have 7 different times, 7 different events. You need to tell someone something 7 times before they understand it. It usually takes 11 impressions, right? So there's some like duplicative things, and then it has to be across 4 platforms, which is, you know, kind of goes back to this: what is this go-to-market motion or personal brand thing? Is there one, you know, platform or strategy to rule them all? And I think the answer is no. Like, you really do have to have a balanced approach that makes you feel like you are in all the places that your people, your ICP is.
Also, like, diving down deeper into that, I feel like if you spend a lot of time narrowing down your ICP, it makes it easier for you to validate it or invalidate that group of ICP. I had someone on the pod, I want to say episode 28 or 9, runs an agency, and what he was talking about was once they decided to go from, hey, we do paid advertising for everyone, to paid ads for travel industry, skyrocketed their sort of inbound and conversions. Also, they could now focus a lot of their efforts on just this space and industry, right? And so, to your point, I think being super narrow gets really easy to validate and move on. But there's also probably some connotation of like, too narrow, too small a TAM, so let me go wide, you know, have a bigger company. And so I feel like there's a couple things there where like founders end up picking the wrong thing, but I could be wrong.
Well, the thing about picking the thing, right, like picking your sub cohort, right, or that initial ICP, there's what I can't remember the framework, but it was like, what's your, you know, your fanatics? Find your 1,000 fanatics. That's what every initial startup needs to do, is like find that, which inherently means that you just have to continue to niche down until you can find the people who just are, that's like what you're building is the one thing in their life that is missing, right? But if you juxtapose that across social media now, right, if you think of the typical outbound motion for a B2B company or even a B2C company, is like, we want to engage them, it's awareness, we get them in the top of the funnel, you know, we think about how to reach out to them, email them, call them, market to them, moving them down. These algorithmic shifts about content discovery and trying to like niche down is like, you have to speak to that group like deeply, right, for them to do it. So I would argue it's never been more true in terms of leveraging these social media platforms, for whether it's for your company's message or for your own personal brand, hits the nail so on the head for a small cohort, because those are the people who are going to share it, and that's the thing that these algorithms are rewarding now, right? It's the shares, it's the comments, it's
100%.
the things that create more network effect, and right, more so than the follow. So I would say the niching down is as true as it has ever been, but it does not mean that you can just go and do it and not have some idea, some sense as to how you're going to quantify or evaluate or measure the effectiveness. You have to have a thought or a feeling about how to determine whether or not this is working or not.
What are you doing for Tomi on this front, right? So let's talk about some of the ideas you have and strategies you have for
Yeah.
Tomi and how you're either validating, invalidating that approach as well. And just
So
like, why don't you also briefly cover the challenge you're trying to solve with marketing? Is it understanding of your product? Is it introduction to your product? Is it education around that this is even an option? Like, what problem are you trying to solve? And then
yeah.
how are you trying to do it? And what's worked, what's not worked so far?
Yeah. Tomi's a platform that makes it easier for groups of people to coordinate resources and co-own homes together, right? You co-buy. Once you own the home, you manage the home collectively, and then eventually you sell it, right? The plan is to be there through the entire life cycle of a shared home. The challenge with that, because if you tell that to anyone, everyone has some degree. It's like it's really easy for them to just like, oh, me and my friends, or me and my family, or me and a couple people that I've known for years online but have never met. We all can go in and buy this thing, and whether it's my home or it's an investment property or anything like that, we want to be the platform that supports you, to help you collectively realize your goals, right? The challenge with that I have found is that there is not a lot of standardized language because there is a lack of understanding and awareness about the concept as a whole. We might have talked about this last one, but you go and talk to anybody about what shared home ownership or co-ownership would look like, and everyone's like, oh, I've had that conversation before. Like, yeah. my cousin's done it, or I just talked to my friends about it when we were vacationing the other week, right? Everyone has some like really fleeting connection to it because it sounds really good in practice, or it sounds really good in theory, right? But in practice, it's like, well, what's the step that we take to make it real? And as soon as it goes to like, everything that I'm reading online says like we need a co-ownership agreement and we should talk to a lawyer. That's it, right? That's the hurdle that never gets cleared, because it's like, how you got to be real serious if you're going to take a $400
too hard all of a sudden.
Yeah, it's too expensive, right? It's too real, right? You got to be really committed, and it's like, okay, now you and I have this good conversation. Am I going to go reach out to the lawyer, and am I going to pay the $250 for the hour, or are we going to split it, or right? Yeah. So it all, and that's I think the opportunity that we have as it relates to this space is I'm basically at this point doing home co-ownership agreements and providing real estate advisory services at no cost. If you've got a group of people and you want to co-own a property with someone, I will help you get qualified for the financing. I will help you connect to a real estate agent. I will help you draft a co-ownership agreement that is compliant in the state in which your property is domiciled, right? And I'll do it all for you upfront at no cost to you, the entire group. We can talk more about what the business model and decisions about that. But the challenge, right? So it's like you've got this value proposition. It makes sense, at the highest level. But what do people search for online when they want to start to indicate that they're interested in this topic, right? Yeah. They probably don't know about the concept of a co-ownership agreement or a tenant in common agreement, right? They might search like, how do I own a home with friends? Which is very, as far as like trying to categorize the intent there, it's very information seeking and not transactional, right? Are they searching for house hacking? Is it co-living? Is it an intentional community, right? There's no organizational structure around the language, which I think makes it really hard for someone in this. That's why no one's nailed this space yet, is because I think coalescing people around the right vernacular and the right terms is hard. It's an organizational problem through and through. And that's because there's a big knowledge gap or educational gap between where people are, even though they want it, and where they need to be in order to do it well. And this is kind of doubled down on my conviction here from in the time that I've been working with this other group on offering trust and trustee services, right? So I'm working with this company that helps you develop revocable or irrevocable trust, asset protection trusts, right? Things that help you avoid probate or, privatize or protect your assets, right? It's the same problem. People are on Instagram, right? And they see a thing and they're like, oh yeah, that makes sense. I've been told that I need this in my estate planning, blah, blah, blah. And then when it comes down to the brass tacks and really understanding what it is you need based off of your profile of assets and your family or like your beneficiary strategy, it becomes really daunting and intimidating. And then you loop in lawyers, right? And so this is one of the things that's really exciting to me about the advent of AI and this whole concept around services as a software, right? As opposed to the, what we've grown up with and understand and have been involved with, which is software as a service. We can create these agents at really low cost to the business,
Yeah.
right? Really high leverage and output to get folks educated and really speak directly to their specific use cases. Obviously, without crossing the line between providing legal or financial advice, but help bring them along in a way that gives them confidence in that they're asking the right questions, they're doing the right things, getting them to that point of value where we can say, all right, sign up for this, we're going to give you this agreement, and then go get it looked at by a lawyer. We can connect you to a lawyer to go
Yeah.
behind the document, and then here's how we can help you with this, right? As we provide the agent and the platform, the system for you and your people to manage all of this in perpetuity or whatever, right? Yeah, I think that there is this like really exciting, interesting space is opening up. It's blue ocean stuff where these are complicated, complex systems or highly regulated structures, ownership structures that exist in this like contractual legal environment and universe that translate to the real world of like, how do we make decisions, or how do I liquidate my shares? And I think that this is going to start to come up. We're going to start to see a bunch of areas. For me and Tomi, it's co-ownership agreements. For these guys over doing the estate planning stuff, it's trusts, dynastic or land trusts or revocable trusts, all these sorts of things. But I think that there's a lot more opportunities if you think about people who might be a digital nomad and moving all around the world. Like, how do they make sure that they're filing their taxes compliantly, right? And all that sort of stuff. So this is where I do anticipate seeing more companies pop up where they're able to figure out a way to leverage artificial intelligence that continues to bring highly complicated and obfuscated ownership structures, making them more dynamic and transparent.
Digestible,
And digestible. Yeah.
Because I think to your point there is, you don't care about the full arrangement. You care about your portion and how it affects you.
That's right.
So how can you dumb down this really complex thing to just, here's what I care about versus...
That's right.
Yeah, it's funny. I was talking to a founder yesterday who's trying to build AI agents for demoing, because he's like, so many people jump on a sales call, do this, do that, versus when you get on, can we have a demo bot that can demo exactly what you need to see for your use case? And if it is that, continue on to a sales call. But if not, in 5 minutes, yes or no, and you can move on. And nobody's time is wasted. So similarly, I feel like there's a lot of use cases there. It's just how good can these be built out, right? So
I think they can. I mean, they're already relatively good. The rate at which they're improving, there's just no reason. I've seen a bunch of people already talk about it, but it's like the companies that will have lasting success are the ones who are building for the version of AI that they need, not the version of AI that exists. Not waiting for the capability to be out there to start like building and putting this into play. You need to go and build the thing from a first principles mindset of like, well, how does this AI tool provide the absolute best user experience or customer journey, the most dynamic, personalized, right? And we're starting to do that again with this other company where we've got outbound SMS agents, we have outbound phone agents, we have support and sales agents inbound. And now as we build out and enrich the profile, so some like Abby, you call and you say, hey, I've got a house in Austin, Texas that I rent. I've got a home in Bentonville, Arkansas that I own. I have a bunch of stock from my last company. I've got some crypto and I have a life insurance policy. I need estate planning. What do I do? Right. And these agents, we've trained them, and also, the internet, are able to pull from just a vast amount of information that are specific to, our business and this particular use case. And we're starting to just continue to provide more, nuanced and specific feedback to them about a land trust would probably be better for you to put your property in for this reason, right? Because you're optimizing for privacy. You don't want your name on public records, and it'll avoid probate. The other assets might be better for an asset protection trust because it's not a land, not in Las Vegas, and the Nevada Asset Protection Trust can offer you these benefits, right? Just breaking it down in really simplistic terms and taking the time, which you get on a sales call with someone, and if they're talking to you and they don't think that you're qualified, like you hear that tone change, right? But you're not gonna get that with AI, right? They'll just sit there and work with you through the problem until you feel like you understand it. And I just think that you're going to just see a very massive, very fast-paced shift towards kind of support and sales functions. that AI can
Yeah.
handle very well.
I want to say I heard some AI SDR just raised like 25 million yesterday or day before. So it's all out there.
It's all out there, and it'll continue to go
Sweet.
up the stack, right? It starts at the bottom of the org chart and just keeps working up. I've got like a kind of tangible, what's like I'm super excited about is I've got a content creation engine going with N8N right now that, I can put a URL, I can message a Slack bot in Slack with a URL, is going to look up that URL. I've got instructions as to drafting a LinkedIn post and giving me 3 marketing emails to choose from. And so it's going out and doing this in the background. And then once it drafts those, it pings me again in Slack and says, hey, here's the draft. If you give me the thumbs up emoji reaction, I'll go draft it in LinkedIn for you, or I'll go add this to the next touch point in your evergreen newsletter, right? If you give a down, or you get a thumbs down, or you want to edit it, you can do that. And so the more time I'm spending thinking about some of these like use cases that I'm building for both the companies that I'm advising and then for Tomi, the more of a kind of a mental model or like a heuristic I'm orienting around how Slack could be kind of the command central for like a one-person shop. I was just thinking about this yesterday. It's like, what does the one person, like the one license, the one user Slack instance, like, is that a product? Is that a product that Slack could be selling? Is like, who cares if you don't have a team? Here's why you want Slack, because you can actually create all this automation in one centralized place, handling all these functions that you're interacting with as like, human in the loop type knowledge steps that I think you're just going to continue to see get more and more like expansive and impressive.
So the reason I like that idea is I feel like Slack, you have the option to do threads. I don't know if working with a bot on threads is easy. I would say it's hard, but I have N8N hooked up to WhatsApp on like a business number. The funny thing is it took 3 days just for me to set up WhatsApp, and WhatsApp doesn't have threads. So now you have to code in memory so that the bot knows context.
Yeah.
And then how far back do you go? If I'm starting a new chat, does the old context mess it up? I don't know.
Did you lose it? Well, this is where the MCP stuff becomes really interesting, right?
Yeah.
The MCP
it broke a couple weeks ago and I haven't fixed it, so I'm still paying for N8N, but I gotta fix it. So I don't know. The WhatsApp just stopped working, and I haven't looked into it since. So.
You think it had something to do with the N8N workflow, or do you think it actually had to do with WhatsApp specifically?
So I think the WhatsApp connection is still there. I think it's the workflow. I think it's their WhatsApp. It's the WhatsApp like trigger or bot, because it works. If I go in, I click a couple buttons, it always ends up working again without me doing anything. There may be some dormancy thing where I didn't use it for a week or two, and it just decided
timed out or something. Yeah, I know you will. I know you will figure it out. But yeah, man, I just think that there's so much that can be done as far as like one person creating a tremendous amount of leverage, or just NFX, the platform, the VC fund, just
I heard about
reintroduced. They just reintroduced, I think yesterday, the three founder unicorn concept, which is just like,
I haven't heard about this. Okay,
yeah, I mean it's exactly as it sounds, right? It's like we are entering a phase where it will be not only likely but probable that you'll have a team of 3 people that can achieve $1 billion
why
valuation.
3? Why not 1?
Exactly. Right.
I think it'll get there. I think it's too early. I think there's so many things that are so human dependent right now, but you can get more efficient. You can cut people out. You can do the job of 2 or 3 with 1, but I still feel like we're not there yet where I can just be like, go do this for me. It knows, because there's so much more human context there. But yes, to your point,
the advent of MCPs is going to be a step in that direction.
It's funny that MCPs have been around for 2.5 years, and it's just now that people are like,
I think
I first heard about MCPs early last year, tried setting it up. I still feel like there's some opportunity to do security around MCPs, because the problem with public MCPs right now is you don't know if they're like keylogging and storing your data, and are you smart enough to figure it out? And if you were, you would just build your own MCP, right?
right.
So like, is there an option to do something like N8N in a box, right? Where it's like, hey, here's a VM you can run everything within that secures it, and everything I read on Reddit, everyone's like, just run a VM and run MCP within it, so that worst case you just kill the VM. It's again another hurdle in the workflow.
Yeah. Oh, N8N just rolled out theirs like yesterday.
Yeah, I heard about that. I saw that.
So that will potentially address some of that concern, right? If it's native to their infrastructure. And Supabase has theirs too now, right? So I think, again, as far as kind of storing that neural network for your proprietary agents, it does feel like the infrastructure is quickly coming to fruition.
But yeah, I think we covered everything we were talking about. I do want to briefly touch upon what's next for Tomi. What are you thinking, and then what you have planned for Tomi?
So for Tomy, it's been an interesting evolution. Again, the problem set in my mind very much about creating more structure and organization. I think the secret about why a company, why Tomy will be the company that not a lot of people are spending time thinking about has less to do with the output of AI and more to do with how we as humans interpret the output from AI, right? Like if you go, a new model gets launched and then you've got a bunch of people who go and stress test it against the other ones, and they've got all of these scores, right? How they did for the ACT or passing the bar, all this sort of stuff, and they just stack rank them, right? It's like, oh, this one was incrementally better at this, but not as good here. What I think that is missing of energy and mental cognition going towards, what is like, how is this stacking up against? But I think there's not really anything being said about how humans are interpreting this information from an AI bot differently than they would be if that information was coming from another human. And I do think that in a scenario like shared homeownership, when you can bring people together that are having to manage this asset, which could be as personal as like two people living in a place as a primary home, right? Unmarried couples are like a perfect example of this, right? What happens when things starts to go sideways or there's a disagreement? Well, you have a legal agreement, which is the thing, that everyone tells you to do that knows about the space, is like, you got this document. How do we navigate the document, or how do we make changes to it because our situation's evolving like everything in the world? Having that AI layer to really be your kind of de facto intermediary for all of these decisions and all of the data that's collected and all the reporting, all the way through to mediation, being able to help people resolve disagreements without having to go to like formal arbitration or like worst case scenario, have to go get litigated, right? I think that's the missing ingredient in this sort of thing that allows shared homeownership to move into this much more widely accepted and embraced form of and growing, especially when you're talking about as like young adults and just trying to make your way through the world, right? Because there's just way too many people today, way too many millennials, way too many Gen, Z, 20 somethings that don't have a viable path forward to any degree of like financial or economic independence, because so much of that historically, especially for the middle class, has been based, or the foundation has been housing, right? The appreciation of real estate, the forced savings mechanism, all the tax benefits. Solving that problem, splitting the atomic unit of real estate, which would be like the single family home, the undivided, parcel of, land, or the home, feels like, to me, a really exciting opportunity and something that I'm just gung ho on doing. And the thing that I'm spending a lot of time as it relates to the marketing piece on, just understanding, to what I was saying earlier, but like finding the ways that I can communicate meaningful value in a way that works for me and so I can do it reliably, is just telling the story about building here with my family, co-owning 2 properties with my mom, my dad living on the property, even though my parents haven't been together for 30 years, showing people as opposed to telling people, I think, is what it's all about. And it's really hard. For the same reason that giving someone advice is way easier than taking advice, right? From yourself, especially, is like when you're sitting in the bubble, when you spend all of your time thinking about, and it's like to take a step back and really distill things down to the basics. That's the biggest thing for me, is like, actually, it goes back to the personal brand, is like, how can I go and tell the story about how my family has utilized shared homeownership in a way that's improved our family dynamic, like the relationships we have together, that's increased our, financial station, being able to afford the mortgages, right? Giving my mom passive income generation. All these types of things is, at the end of the day, it comes back to storytelling, and it does feel like I got a lot of work to do on that front.
Well, it's one step at a time, right?
That's right. All the balls, I can say, do feel like they're going in the right direction, which is encouraging. And that's something too that I would love to leave as kind of like the final nugget of wisdom to anyone out there that's going through this. Like, if you're out there building, it's like only you are going to, be able to assess and like internalize, whether or not the progress you're making is the right kind of progress, or whether it's satisfactory. 100%. But you gotta really listen to yourself and trust it, because it's never going to be 100%. As fast as you want. It's never going to be as easy.
It's never going to be as good as what other people are doing. There's so
That's
much
right.
noise out there that
That's right.
You got to figure out your path, your journey, right?
And
Not everyone has to raise $1 million, $2 million, $5
That's
million,
right.
whatever.
And trusting the process, and believing that, like, when you have a day when you absolutely like grind it out and you bust your ass, like that day will pay dividends in the long run if you can
100%.
remain consistent. Because it's so hard, man. It's so hard in the middle, right? The trough of sorrows, when it's just like, this is not getting any easier. I don't feel like I'm getting any better. All I'm doing is seeing on social media or LinkedIn or whatever that, you know, people are crushing it and doing better than me. Yeah, you gotta stay the course and trust the process.
It's funny, I was talking to this friend the other day, and he has a interest list of like 8,000 people who signed up from like 40,000 impressions on his website.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe 2,000 are actual qualified, like at least marketing qualified leads from the 8,000. He was talking to a founder who's raised 4 million, running out of cash, and is trying to raise another like bridge $2 million round. He's like, and that guy was like, I would love to be in your spot. He's like, why would you want to be in my spot? I've
Yeah.
only raised 500K, whatever.
Uh-huh.
And he's like, because you have a list of 8,000. He's like, I don't have a list. I'm like, then what are you spending this money on? Like, what
Yeah,
are you
right.
like? Why
Where's
have
that
you
money
spent
going?
$4 million and you have very little traction and you're closing another $2 million round?
Yeah.
And so there's just this stark difference of just optics versus reality, and
Yeah.
all you see online is optics, right? And that's one thing I keep telling people is you could build a nice profitable business. You don't have to raise.
Yeah.
Just because that's what gets the headlines doesn't mean you're not successful if you don't raise.
Well,
But
if you've
to your
got
point, you need to define what that is.
what that success is. But I mean, if you've got a 20, 30, 40,000, you know, email list, right? Like selling yourself as the person who's figured it out. People do that because they've seen the reward, right? Beneficial exercise, because people that see you on LinkedIn are like, oh man, that person's clearly figured it out. Look, he's standing in front of a Ferrari on a beach house in Miami, right? Like,
Yeah.
I should join his course. Maybe I'll get that, right? So
Yeah.
it all comes back to this like mimetic way of thinking, is like, I see something that someone else has that they want, and I want that too. We're all just kind of standing in line trying to follow the thing that we think we want. And
There's
that's
a
why it's
really
really important
good
to fucking spend time sitting and unplugging and by yourself thinking about what
there's
you
a really
want.
good Indian movie called Dunki
Okay.
where people are illegally immigrating to Canada from India. People die along the way because when you get to Canada, people are sending back photos in front of big houses. I bought a BMW. That's what people think they're going towards. So the stories where they illegally get a mule, whatever. Some people die on the way. They get there. It turns out all the guys who went there are 20 guys illegally living in one house, like doing like shit job.
Yeah,
But it's still 5x more than what they would do home. So they still do it because they can send money back home.
that's right.
But everyone at home doesn't know how bad of a condition is it. So
Yeah.
you go through the journey because, hey, I'm like, oh, I'll go do all this like fancy shit they're showing me. But in reality, it's not fancy shit. But
Hmm.
again,
Well,
but
the grass is indeed always greener on the other side.
sweet. But no, thank
Yeah,
you for
man.
coming on.